Throughout my life, I've had some very weird experiences. These experiences have also defined me and made me who I am today. Because of this, I have obtained many tales of both the usual and the unusual alike. Some of these tales I am going to tell have morals. However, other stories I'm going to tell are just unusual things that happened to me or things that I have remembered that I thought were strange. Greetings, everybody. Your friendly neighborhood demonic Ravenwolf October is back. I am going to be calling this series of videos October's Weird Tales. And today we have a really weird one for you folks. The tale I am going to tell you is so weird that it built up its own lore at the private school that I went to. I remember when I attended this school, every now and again, when there was a lax in the conversation I had with my friends, somebody would always bring up this unusual experience that we all shared. The conversation would usually start with, "Hey, remember that one weird Matrix lesson?" And of course, we would all agree and remember how strange the whole thing was. Over the course of time, the stories of what happened that day would expand among us and become kind of its own, emerging mythos in a way. Being told and retold, each telling having a new spin on the story. Having thought back on it myself, maybe it wasn't that unusual. And maybe, perhaps, I am misremembering it in some way. But I will say this, it was unusual enough to last as long as it did. Because all the way up till I graduated, people were bringing this up. And the conversation of, remember how weird that lesson, would always persist. Because of the strangeness of this story, I am bringing it to you to be the first of our weird tales. A tale which I like to call The Matrix Story. Before we go forward, for those who don't know, which I'm sure many of you do, The Matrix is a series of 3 movies involving a man named Neo who finds out that his world is in fact a simulation. It goes back to the old concept that reality may not be what it appears to be. When the main characters of the story figure this out, they realize that they can master the Matrix and do extraordinary things such as leap from tall buildings and fly. You know, things that would make anybody suspect they're living in a simulation. Okay, but still a pretty good movie. This, of course, has led to a fascination with the possibility that we could perhaps live in a computer simulation. This has led to the creation of books, papers, and memes. Lots and lots of memes. What made this whole experience even weirder is that the lesson we were taught had nothing to do with the possibility of that we may live in a simulation, or even the philosophy that our reality may not be a real reality. In fact, the whole Matrix part itself is really unusual and may not have had to been worked into the lesson to begin with, making the whole experience that much more strange. With that out of the way, let me set the stage of the situation. One day, we were all called into the assembly room where various lessons were often taught to a large body of the students. Right in the front of the assembly room, this lady stood who we had never seen before and who we would never see since. She told us of the importance of mastering reading and understanding the patterns and rules, or as she put it, codes of letters, so we all could become better readers. Now, we had similar lectures before. This was nothing new to us. In these lectures, we were often taught that letters had certain rules that we had to follow in order to make the correct pronunciations. Having heard this type of lesson before, we were all prepared to hear the same old shtick about how certain pairings of letters would lead to different pronunciations and all sorts of things. However, this is where the lesson kind of took a turn for the weird. She then said that reading is like mastering the Matrix because Neo did amazing things, I guess? By mastering it, maybe? I don't know. This is kind of where the whole thing started to just fall apart. Because after they said this, they played this scene. While this clip played, they said, "See, all that code? He has mastered it, and now he can do miraculous things. And because of that, he has mastered the Matrix and has an understanding of it." After the clip ended, she went on to say, "You see, you can master the rules of reading and do amazing things." And that was the end of the lesson. We went back to class, and that was it. However, with this said, there still are a lot of things that don't really add up. For instance, the example I use where they told us that different pairings of words can have different pronunciations wasn't in this lesson. In fact, for all the mastering of reading we talked about in the lesson, we never even got to how to master reading. I mean, a perfect example of this would be how different languages can affect the pronunciation of English words, or how different lettering and different positioning of words can affect how we pronounce the different vowels. And yeah, there's just a lot of stuff they just did not get into. I also might want to add that the whole getting us excited to read thing didn't really work. In fact, it kind of just gave us a funny thing to talk about when we had nothing else to talk about. I remember one particular time we were supposed to be reading and this lesson came up instead, and we started talking about it instead of reading. So take that for what it's worth. The final weird thing about this story I want to mention is that we never saw this teacher ever again after that day. She just disappeared. I did, of course, hear rumors that the reason she left was because this lesson was so bad. But I'm 100% sure that's not true. Because throughout my time there at this private school, many teachers came and went, simply because they got other job opportunities at public school. So the fact that somebody would suddenly leave the school wasn't so unusual as people made it out to be. However, the fact that she suddenly disappeared did add on to the strangeness of the story. And I think that was the reason that it perpetuated for so long among us. I think what happened here is that this was perhaps an incomplete lesson. Like maybe there were going to be a series of lessons where we would get to rules, but since the teacher got another opportunity elsewhere, that never happened. So we only really got one lesson from them and didn't receive the others, so we never officially got the full lesson. At least that's what I think happened. Thank you for listening to our series of Weird Tales. Do you have a weird lesson that you still think about to this day? What was it that made it so strange? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and I'll be seeing you soon. Hey, if you enjoy our content, maybe you would like to help us support our channel. Every little bit helps. I would also like to give a special shout out to the amazing artist who did the extraordinary character stills we used in this video. The ever incredible Bleptarts. Definitely check out their artwork if you get the chance. Also, if you're interested in the flittering thoughts that go upon in my brain, consider following us on Blue Sky. And thank you once again for your support.